The cinematic image of the cowboy diet usually involves thick steaks over an open fire. The historical record suggests a much leaner, dustier reality. A typical cattle drive covered 2,000 miles of unforgiving terrain. Men spent up to 14 hours a day in the saddle, burning energy as fast as they could consume it. Out on the plains, a cowboy was always riding a razor-thin line between exertion and starvation. In 1866, trail cook Charles Goodnight attempted to bridge this gap. He bolted a wooden box to the back of an army wagon and created the chuck wagon, a rolling kitchen, pharmacy, and supply hub all packed into a few square feet. The man at the chuck box dictated the daily rhythm for every rider. He was the first to wake, the last to sleep, and held final say over the distribution of the crew's food and medicine. The meals coming out of those wagons appalled Eastern journalists, who called the dishes barbaric. But for the men on the trail, every recipe was forged by the logistical limits of the wagon. Out here, the success of a drive rested on the cook's ability to transform 2,000 pounds of dry goods into months of sustained physical labor. To feed 12 men in the middle of nowhere, ingredients had to meet 3 requirements. They had to be inexpensive, survive for months without refrigeration, and deliver slow-burning energy. The primary starch was hardtack, dense squares of flour and water baked entirely dry. Brought from the Civil War, these sheet iron biscuits were so tough men soaked them in coffee to chew them, yet one cracker delivered 75 calories of pure survival energy. Alongside the hardtack came salt belly pork and brown beans, often called Pecos strawberries. Ranch foremen budgeted these items strictly. At roughly 12 cents a pound for salt pork, they offered a high caloric return for a very low investment. The resulting diet was greasy, salty, and monotonous. Cooks fried the pork until the fat rendered out, then tossed the beans into the same pan to soak up the drippings. Cowboys ate this combination twice a day for weeks at a stretch. This menu was a form of caloric economics. It was a strategy designed to extract the maximum amount of work from the lowest financial cost. But the base load of pork, beans, and hardtack carried a danger. While it provided enough calories to keep a man moving, it lacked the specific vitamins required to sustain health over a long-distance drive. When fresh beef was available, the cowboys utilized the entire animal to fill those gaps. They prepared son-of-a-gun stew, a dish that used the heart, liver, sweetbreads, tongue, and the marrow gut, a tube that provided a rich, creamy texture. This chart compares standard muscle meat against organ meats. While steak offers protein, offal provides massive spikes in vitamins A, B12, iron, and zinc. These specific nutrients, particularly B12 and iron, aided physical recovery and maintained stamina through weeks of manual labor and exhaustion. By the 1870s, another critical nutrient arrived on the frontier. Canned tomatoes provided a reliable source of vitamin C, helping to prevent scurvy on drives where fresh produce was entirely unavailable. Long before modern nutrition science mapped out human vitamin requirements, the logistical constraints of the frontier pushed cowboys toward a diet with surprising nutritional completeness. Physical endurance was only half the problem. Consuming the same flavorless starch for weeks takes a psychological toll. Maintaining the crew's morale was as much a part of the cook's job as the cooking itself. Cooks used shelf-stable staples to mimic missing luxuries. They invented vinegar pie, using sugar, eggs, and a splash of vinegar to simulate the acidity and flavor of a fresh lemon pie. The most essential tool for morale was Arbuckle's coffee. It served as a stimulant, a medicine, and a social ritual. For many cowboys, the first pot of coffee before dawn was the only moment of sanctuary in the day. The volume consumed was immense, often reaching a gallon per man per day. It was the primary fuel that allowed riders to maintain basic functionality during long night guards and brutal weather. The trail cook functioned as a manager of both caffeine and sugar, using whatever supplies he had to keep the crew from reaching a mental breaking point. While 19th century observers found the cowboy diet revolting, the modern wellness industry now markets bone broth and organ meat for their concentrated nutrient profiles. These survival strategies were often learned from the indigenous peoples of the plains. Techniques for drying meat and utilizing every part of the animal had been perfected over centuries before the first cattle drives ever began. This wasn't based on studies or white papers. It was the logic of the trail. Wasting food meant losing the energy needed to survive. The long-range cattle drives that shaped the American frontier were essentially marathons of biological endurance. Without the specific caloric and medicinal management provided by the chuck wagon, the men in the saddle simply could not have sustained the effort. The cowboys of the cattle empire operated on a diet that prioritized survival over every other factor. It was a system that transformed basic dry goods into a biological engine. Which of these frontier meals would you be willing to try? Let us know in the comments.